evening is brilliant. I think the best place to start this evening is to just say that, one, I want this to more or less be an informal discussion. I don't want it to just be me in a virtual space speaking to you in another virtual space. So at any point, if you want to unmute, if you have any questions, or just kind of want to make any comments, feel free to jump in. And I think the other thing that I wanted to start with is that I mean, with everything that Paige has just read, I definitely come to I guess this evening's talk, one as an artist, but then also as a facilitator / curator. So I've been on both sides of open calls, and yeah, it's interesting to kind of speak a little bit about that. I mean, I'm not saying that I have any massive expertise. So if there's anything that you want to add, do feel free to jump in. So I think, actually, I think there's someone that, if you want to just mute while you're typing, I think we're all good. So I think the first thing that I want to start with is, what is an open call? And there are many different names to that. So, I mean, just doing a really quick, Google search, and you have call for entry, call for artists, artist opportunities, open calls, call for submission. And so this thing of open calls and call for submissions, or an open, or, call for entry, they kind of all say the same thing. And it's essentially that you're, I guess, if you think of an open call as applying for a job. So I'm going to show you a few examples. The first is this website. So it's theartguide.com, and it's specifically tailored for opportunities that are in the US. But I just kind of quickly wanted to look through at, I mean, in one column, it tells you exactly what the project or the exhibition is, where it's going to take place, so the gallery name, as well as the state in the US, and then the entry deadline, which that's kind of basic if you're thinking about opportunities. Another website, I don't know why my arrows aren't working. Another website that you can find call outs are Artwork Archive, and they have lists. So this is one page. They just literally have lists of exhibitions or fairs that are coming up, or online competitions. And within that, you have the organization of who is putting it together, or the gallery, the submission deadline, the event. So it kind of gives you all of the details that you need. So I think when you're thinking about open calls, I think if you're kind of stepping onto the platform as a new to the scene artist, or you've not really ventured into open calls, I think the best way to think about it is it's a job application, or a job that you're applying for. So this, I wanted to look at a few examples. This is an open call from an exhibition called One at the Spiegelheim. I'm not sure if I said that correctly, but the Spiegelheim Gallery. So I'm just going to click through to that, and we'll just have a really quick look at kind of what they're asking for, what the information that they give you. So here we go. No, I got to scroll down. Sorry, I clicked through to the wrong bit. There we go. Oh my days. Here we go. All right. So they have a page that's designated specifically for the exhibition. So they've got the title of the exhibition, when it's running for. Nope, that's the wrong thing. Sorry. Here we go. So yeah, so they've got the title of the exhibition, the dates of the exhibition's running for, and really easy to look through are the dates, or the significant dates of the exhibition in a capsule. So you're thinking about when the call for submissions opens, when it closes, when you'll get a notification if you've been accepted in the process or not, when the actual exhibition opens and closes. And that's kind of basic in terms of knowing exactly what to expect from an art gallery, or a project, or a charity, or an institution that you're working with. But then I think the other thing is, do you fit the brief? So with this one, they're asking for work that fit within a specific genre. So they're looking at outsider art, art brut, folk art, and self-taught artists. So that's something to kind of think about, like, you know, very much kind of in terms of job applications. Do I fit the call of what the exhibition is looking for, this project is looking for? And then I'll just kind of walk us through the form really quickly. I won't go into too many details. But here you get a little bit more of what you can expect from the gallery, what you can expect from the process, terms and conditions. And most exhibition projects or galleries will have this detailed in either their call out or the actual application process. A little bit later on, I'll walk you through one of the process of applying for call outs from the gallery specifically. So we have paper forms that we're also working in the digital form. So they more or less kind of say the same thing in terms of when you'll be notified, making sure that there's clarity and transparency in the whole process. So just working through very simply, so they ask for your name, your email, if you have a website, and your Instagram, if you do work on Instagram, where you're located, and then the number of works you're submitting. Here, the maximum number is 3. And then details about each submission. So the title of it, and then a file showing exactly what the submission is. And within, they kind of say exactly like what they expect from you. They're not looking for artist statements in the selection process. Where did you hear about it? Final check, submit. So that's just I like this one. I'm not a robot. But yeah, so that's one gallery. And I'll quickly look through. So there's a few more. So the other one is, so this website called Kickstart Art Farmington, and for an exhibition called Emergence. So, and by the way, feel free to apply to any of these if you fit into them. So they're all coming up. They're not past ones, they're all active and live. So this one talks about, kind of gives you information about the exhibition itself, what the theme is, talking about where the exhibition is going to be. And with this one, which you'll find with a few open calls, but a lot of times it depends on the organization or the gallery. So for this one, they're asking for a fee for each piece that you submit. So if you submit 3 pieces, it's 25 US, 5 pieces, it's 40. Most of the times you see a fee connected to like competitions. It's kind of unusual to see fees connected with exhibitions, but in the sense that they've connected a fee to that. And then they have very specific, so this is one of the reasons why I want us to look at this, is that they have very specific expectations of the artwork that's submitted. So you can submit only 5 pieces, they have to be ready to hang. They're open to all media, so 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, but they have to fit within 18 by 24 inches or smaller. So that's something to always think about. And I'll kind of, in terms of thinking about the space, there's in the next submission, that process that we'll look at, I'll show you something else that that's quite interesting that you'll see with some submissions as well. Here they talk about sales, which is a really important thing to think about for the project or the exhibition. Is, you know, will selling your work be a component that's considered, or you know, what happens to the work if it is sold or if it's not sold? Thinking about that that saleability, but also that transition of where does the work go after and before the exhibition, or before and after. Key dates as usual. I think I wanted, yeah, so I think we won't go through the form on that one. But the last one that I want us to look at in terms of online spaces is this one. So it's Art Space, and they have an exhibition that's coming up, and this is they don't really give you much information about the actual exhibition. It's very much kind of like an open, we are a contemporary art space. We're looking for artworks that fit within that. So emerging, mid-career and senior artists, looking for experimental and non-critically engaged work. So that's kind of more or less all they give you, where the other ones are very specific in terms of dimensions, very specific in terms of the genre that they're asking artists to work with. So that's something that this one's a little bit more open for, I guess, for space, not interpretation, but yeah, I guess your artistic interpretation in terms of what you feel fits within that. They give you the exact time when the submission closes. And with this one, so this is kind of along the lines of what we do at the gallery. So here they're asking you to include very specific things. So we have a project proposal. So they're giving you a whole page to write a project proposal. And I guess because of the nature of the work that they're asking for, with it being quite experimental or critical, that they're asking for technical requirements as well. Your artist statement, which is some very interesting thinking about that from the two previous submission or calls that we looked at, was that they didn't really require an artist statement or kind of like your artist bio or your CV. But this one asks for your artist statement and your artist bio, which are quite different. So the artist statement is usually attached to the work that you're submitting. So if you work specifically in a theme, or if you work with very particular media, then that's something that you would include in the artist statement, talking about the works that you're submitting. And then the bio would then kind of talk about yourself generally as an artist. Your current CV, I mean, they've given you 3 pages max, which is incredible. I don't think if as an artist or as a professional, I don't think I could fill 3 pages. But yeah, so they kind of, with the CV, that is then the kind of the facts to back up what you say in your bio. So kind of talking very specifically about exhibitions that you've been a part of, if you've been included in any kind of publications or any competitions. So those are some of the things that you want to make sure that you highlight in the CV. And then any other material that supports the artist statement. So those are where you'd insert the images, as well as supporting the proposal. So if you think about this in the sense of applying for a job, that it's kind of, I mean, the requirements, they're asking for a few more things, because I mean, you wouldn't put in technical requirements for a job unless you have very specific needs in terms of accessibility. But asking for a bio statement and then a CV is quite intense. And it's something that I would advise that you start working on before you even start thinking about calls for submissions. I find that one of the hardest things that kind of as an artist is to think about yourself in these terms of like, okay, well, writing a CV, writing a bio, and writing a statement. And I feel like a lot of times that we'll write a bio, or yeah, I'm going to talk about the bio specifically. We'll write a bio, and 3 years later, it's the same bio that we're working with. And it's, I think one thing that is really important is to try to update it frequently, even if it's just like an interesting online, well, not just, but if it's an interesting online course that you did, or being a part of a short project or a pop-up exhibition, making sure that you include that into your artist bio, so it shows that you are quite current and constantly moving within your practice. All right. Does anyone have any questions so far? No? Okay.
If you also prefer to write your questions in the chat, feel free to do that as well throughout the presentation.
Thanks, Paige. All right, so kind of going through what are just kind of condensing everything that we've looked at. So what are some of the things that, as an artist applying for an artist call out or a call for submissions or a call for proposals, what are some of the things that you need to kind of keep an eye out for or be aware of? One of the things that I will say is that I kind of forgot to mention earlier is that a call for submissions and a call for proposals sometimes are used in the same context, but generally they're quite, well, not quite, but they can be different. So when you think of a call for proposals, a lot of times this is where you'd submit preliminary sketches, or you'll have a write-up about a project that you want to actualize, but it's still in like the development, research, planning stage. And a lot of times the exhibitions or projects or galleries or curators will understand that as creatives, that there's there are projects that you can't actually actualize until you either have appropriate funding or you have the appropriate environment or setting. So sometimes you'll have like a project in the back of your mind, it's like, oh, this would be brilliant, but I don't know how to make this come into reality until you see an exhibition or a project that fits into, and that's where you can submit a proposal for that. But it's very much saying that this kind of outlining really detailed, this is what I intend to create for this project. This is how long it's going to take, any kind of materials that you'll need if there is funding for it, and kind of it's almost like going to tender in that sense, that you put out this proposal of work that's not created, where a call for submission a lot of the times is asking for very specific work that's already been made. So photographs, whether that's if it's a digital work, or if it's a 3D sculpture, an object, that making sure that it's represented in a way that when the curators or the jurors are looking at images of your submission, that they can understand exactly what it is that you've created. So when you're looking for call outs or job opportunities, artist opportunities, exhibiting opportunities, you want to look at the eligibility. So the media that it's calling for, or the genre that it's calling for, or the size that it's calling for, or the topic, is that what you normally practice in? So do you fit within that? Or do you see yourself being able to stretch to fit within that? And I think that that's one of the exciting things about call for proposals, is using it sometimes as a way to step outside of and challenging yourself, whether that's challenging yourself in terms of working with a new palette if you're a painter, or a new media or a new medium if you work specifically in sculpture and you want to now work in digital art, or vice versa. So kind of challenging yourself, or even critically. So if you're really excited by a theme, and you know that you can work within that, like, really investigating and researching that. So looking at the eligibility and how you sit within that. So making sure that you're qualified in that sense for this project or exhibition. The location of it, which is really important. So is it virtual? Is it physical? Is it local? Do you have to send things do you have to ship? Do you have to think about packaging? Do you have to think about insurance? So that's something else that you want to think about, is how will the work actually appear in that space or in that project? And then thinking about submission deadline. And so I spoke about the specific genre media, the cost included. One of the exciting things with callouts is that sometimes there will be kind of like a stipend that's attached to it, or there'll be the opportunity to kind of win a prize. So thinking about the Biennial as well. So the Biennial that we had at the National Gallery, and that there's kind of both of those. So in one sense, there was a stipend awarded for if you applied within a certain time. And although it was a small stipend, but something that helped, especially coming out the back of the pandemic. We're still within the pandemic, but, specifically in Cayman, coming out of the pandemic and thinking about materials and, the difficulties associated with creating art in this time, but then also the award part of it. So, being able to walk away with a cash prize or a residency opportunity. So, what are some of the benefits, the additional benefits, apart from just showing your work, that you can find with this project? Thinking about the image submission requirements, so the size of the image, the quality of the image, you know, whether or not you want to watermark the image. So I have seen where artists have watermarked an image, and being a part of the jury process, that you know, we weren't sure, is the watermark actually a part of the work, or is it, you know, to protect the image? So sometimes making sure that a watermark can be distinguished separately from the image itself. And a lot of times that's for like photographs or screenshots of digital work. We spoke about artist statements, having a CV, websites and portfolios. So I would recommend, and this is something that I try to do as well, is having a physical portfolio depending on the format of your work, but then also having a website presence. And a lot of times that you'll find being able to have websites that you don't have to pay for, you know, you don't have to go through something like WordPress. You could go through, it's Wix, or different artists databases that they'll allow you to have your online portfolio in that sense. Thinking about the notification date. So this is specifically if, you know, when you'll be notified if you've been accepted or not, and how that falls within your, I guess, not your requirements, but your schedule. You know, and this is kind of, I've seen this happen a few times, kind of personally, when I've applied for an artist call out, and, you know, fellow artists that were notified but were on holiday and they didn't check their email, so they missed the notification to respond by a certain date, or they didn't catch the email, so then they didn't start developing the project, so it wasn't ready in time, or that, you know, other things came up and it was just kind of, it didn't really fall within their timeline. So looking to see if you know that like a certain time of year is really busy for you, or if you have another project that's coming up, make sure that that those dates, those important dates, that you're available, or you're able to check your emails. Delivery of artwork. So thinking in one of the other one of the call outs we looked at, it said, you know, hang ready. So making sure that when you deliver the work that it's ready to go, if that's a requirement, or communicating that really clearly with whoever is facilitating the project or the exhibition, to say that, you know, this work needs to be, it needs to be framed. Is that something that you can do, or will I be able to have time, you know, from the acceptance date to the delivery to be able to get that framed? So speaking really clearly and openly, and understanding what the expectations are in terms of delivery of artwork, as well as, you know, do you have to book to have it delivered if it's a huge piece, or is there a facilitation of the exhibition or project managers to be able to collect the work? And then the end of the exhibition and the project. So I kind of touched on this briefly, is thinking about, you know, will the work be up for sale? If it's up for sale, does the individual that's purchased it, do they collect just after the exhibition, or do you have to go and collect it and deliver it to them? What happens to the artwork? So I know that there are several competitions or projects or exhibitions that you can be a part of, that they're quite prestigious, but at the end of it, the institution get to keep the work. And that's a good way for you to have your work in a specific collection, to have exposure, but it's kind of, are you ready to commit to, you know, this piece of work no longer being in your collection, and kind of, you know, that's it. It goes off at the end of the exhibition. Do we have any questions before I move on? No, I can't see anyone's face because I've turned off the faces. So please do feel free to unmute or drop it in the chat. Okay, so I really quickly want to go over some templates that we use at the gallery. Actually, I think I'll just go through the filled out one just to save on time. So this is for a project, the COVID-19 or the Art Under Lockdown project that we did. And And a lot of our open calls or calls for submissions, calls for proposals will be formatted like this. So the first 2 paragraphs very generally tell you about the project, what you can expect, and kind of one of the things that we try to do is give prompts within our open calls, just to help you as artists to be able to kind of think within, you know, what are the themes, what are some of the important things that we want to see coming out from that. Within this exhibition, sorry, this is the 2020 exhibition actually. Within 2020 vision, within the exhibition, we had 4 distinct themes, and that's something that you'll find within exhibitions, specifically with the Biennial that just happened, or that is currently happening, that with the call out that we had very specific themes for artists to respond to directly. Sometimes it'll be quite broad. So you may have seen today that Paige sent out a call for submissions for a Sister Islands exhibition, and that's quite broad because of the theme and the topic. It doesn't have very specific sub-themes within the exhibition. And kind of what we expect, or what you can expect from the project itself. So for this particular project, it was in collaboration with the Cayman Islands government, and the submissions were then converted into a publication. So within that, we then kind of break down the submission process. So 1, making sure that the application form is complete. That sounds really simple and basic. But there are many times that I have gone through and seen forms that are not complete. They don't have the artist's name, and you have to kind of guess it. And you're like, oh, well, it came from this email address, put it through the database. Okay, it's this person, or it doesn't have the title of the work or the media. So it's really important, because one of the things that I will say that I know, being not at the gallery, but being a part of other call-up processes, that if you don't meet the basic submission requirements, sometimes your application isn't even looked at properly. It's just thrown in the bin. It's because there's so many applications that come in that it's like, well, I don't have time to sit down and go back and request things. At the gallery, we're a little bit more lenient sometimes to that. Don't look at Paige too hardly. Paige is probably glaring at me, but you know, to the detriment of us as a team, it's kind of going back and forth saying, okay, well, can you send me a high-res image because the image that you sent wasn't good? Or, you know, one of the biggest things that we get is everything being submitted as a PDF. And that's brilliant. And I understand, you know, why you'd want to submit things as a PDF, but it's really difficult for us as a team, specifically Paige as assistant curator, to copy and paste that information to be able to present it to the jurors and curatorial team. So then it means converting a PDF. And I understand that, like, there are, you know, different reasons why you'd want to submit something as a PDF versus as a Word document. But in terms of submitting things to the gallery, a Word document, we would highly prize. And making sure that your images are great. So kind of basic information, thinking about, so for this specific exhibition, it was a photography exhibition. So there are some specific things in terms of cropping, file format, color moding, RGB versus grayscale. And you know, the size not exceeding 15 megabytes, but that was because of the I just lost the word, the nature of this exhibition. So really quickly, just to let you know, we're not giving away anyone's information. This is just a made up person, Star Ebanks. But if you do know a star, this is definitely not that star that you're thinking. So very simply, your name, email, how to contact you, title of the work, date it was made, medium, resolution of the image that you're submitting, and information about the work. Very simple, and it's kind of consistent that you'll find across different platforms, different exhibition callouts, different project briefs. It's kind of more or less the same information that we're asking for, just so that as the curatorial team, or as a jury, or as the project manager, or, you know, whoever it is that's looking at your submission is able to actually visualize what it is that you're presenting. Not just in terms of seeing an image and thinking, oh, that's great, but knowing what's the context behind this, what's the references, what are the references that they're making, how large is it? There was a piece that was submitted for an exhibition recently that we thought it was quite a small piece that we were like, brilliant, we'll put it on a plinth, this is where it's going to go. And it wasn't until quite later on that we realized the size of the piece. And that was something that I think, yeah, that's probably as a curatorial team, but, you know, if you don't put in the size of the work, then you could completely throw out the whole exhibition, completely throw out the flow of work. And sometimes it might be rejected in the end, because if it doesn't fit within, you know, what the curators or what the project managers are thinking of, then it, you know, it kind of makes it difficult. So lastly, on the application form is kind of what you can expect from, this is specifically for individuals that kind of like the eligibility criteria. And this is because the project was working in collaboration with the government. So there was a little bit more information as it was sent out to individuals that were in the diaspora, so that we're living abroad. And then in terms of, you know, what is accepted and what you can expect from the National Gallery, as well as from the government in terms of the project. And this is one of the things that you kind of see a lot, is that clarity or transparency in terms of what you can expect from the institution or from the gallery or from the project itself. Okay, does anyone have any questions about that so far? No? Okay. All right, so kind of what to expect in terms of once you've found an open call, or you found a job that fits perfectly, and you've got all of the requirements, all of the things, kind of the selection process. And this is something that I was speaking about just now in terms of what to expect, but I'll quickly, I feel like there was something that I wanted to show you, but it's not come up. So in terms of this exhibition, so it's the one exhibition at this Bongelheim, didn't want to say it wrong. They speak very openly. So this is thinking about, so there's a section when you go on to apply that asks, just move my glasses and now I can't really see. So it asks for the selection process. So when you select this, it brings you to the About page. But within the About page, there are questions that are very direct about what you can expect from the gallery. Where is it located? It's a virtual gallery. You know, thinking about how many exhibitions they have, previous exhibitions, who's been exhibited, how do you submit your work? What are they? So, you know, it kind of goes through all of these things in terms of, you know, will your work be for sale? And it walks you through a lot of the questions that you may have, one about, you know, the project or the exhibition that you're going to be submitting to, but a lot of times they'll kind of detail the selection process. What I did want to show you was something that I found really interesting that it was in this one. Okay, here we go. So two things that I found really interesting with this call out was that they ask you to look while you're preparing your submission at their floor plan as well as past exhibitions. And this kind of goes back to thinking about space. So I'll just zoom out a bit for you. So it kind of details two galleries. So this is this is the second gallery and their main gallery space. It gives you the dimensions of the space. So, you know, making sure that your artwork is able to fit within that. If they say they have 21 pieces in the exhibition, you have to think, okay, well, you know, on approximate, maybe 10 artists will submit a certain size. And then the height. which is something that's really important, and something that at the National Gallery we've had a few times where individuals have submitted work that are too tall and we've had to adjust the plinths, adjust different things to try to make it fit. But that's one of the things, and I understand that, like, you know, as an artist myself, that it is difficult sometimes thinking about those constraints and thinking, well, you know, I think this work would be brilliant if it looked this way. But if you want to have it exhibited in a certain space, you do have to think about those constrictions. And the other is looking at their past exhibitions. And I think this is a brilliant thing to do, just as good practice as an artist. So if there is a particular institution that you're working with, or a particular gallery, or maybe even a specific curator. So, you know, if you're responding directly to a curator's call out, if they do have archives about, you know, past exhibitions, I would definitely recommend taking a look at them, thinking, you know, do they exhibit more paintings versus photographs or sculptures, or is it more conceptual, or is it more a traditional space? So very much thinking about, you know, and I know that sometimes exhibitions will try to step outside of those, you know, what they've done in the past to do something that's very new and fresh. But a lot of times that they'll kind of work within almost like a set constraint for different reasons. So that's something that I would say as good practice is something to keep in mind when applying. And then kind of, so this is something that I kind of touched on a little bit. So once you've selected the gallery, or not the gallery, the exhibition call out that you want to put your work in, or the project, you've put all your information together, with your bio, your CV, your statement, your images, the concept, you submit it, you're accepted, woohoo. What are some of the things in terms of practically that you have to think about of getting your artwork into that space? So if it's virtual, you know, how do you transfer the documents over, or the file over to you know, the curatorial team, or through to the project manager? If it needs to be shipped or it needs to be delivered, what are the costs of that? Are there reliable ways of getting it there to ensure that it's not damaged? Thinking about insurance. So during the exhibition, is that something that was detailed in the application process, that the insurance will be covered by the gallery or the project management, or whoever's managing the project or the exhibition? Or do you have to get your own insurance? And that's something, I've worked with a project before where insurance had to be covered individually by artists. And that's a tricky thing to navigate. And I would definitely say that to definitely ask that up front, because anything can happen. Natural disasters can happen, thefts can happen, anything can happen. So you want to make sure that your work is insured. Signing the contracts. So what do the contracts say in terms of when the artwork is delivered? Does it talk about insurance again? Does it talk about the selling of the artwork? Is there a commission that's involved in that? So kind of looking through the contract really specifically. And then the expectations of the project and the exhibition, or the project and the exhibition. So thinking about the location, the duration of the show, when do you need to collect it? How will it be collected? And then again, sale of the artwork. So those are some of the things that are kind of the afterthought, or the after the whole process is completed, but are really important to think about, kind of also in the middle of submitting a call for submissions as well. And I think that's me. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to put it back so I can see everyone's face, which will be really nice.
I did have a couple of questions come through the chat. One really great question is, how can you get put on our artist database so that you can receive these open calls and other information that relates to you artists? So you're welcome to give us a call anytime during our opening hours, and shoot me an email. My email is assistantcurator@nationalgallery.org.ky. And I'll put that in the chat so you can copy paste it if you need it. But yeah, definitely get on that list so that you can stay up to date.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that came through is, will this presentation be available for us to review individually? So yes, this session is being recorded right now, so it will be available shortly. The platform for that availability is to be decided, so stay tuned to see where that will be posted. And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or continue putting that in the chat. We'll have a little discussion.
I'd be happy to share the actual presentation as well. So that's something that anyone wants to look through.
That's a great idea. Yeah, we'll send out this presentation after this session.
No questions. Or I think not just questions, but one of the things that I was interested in while I was developing this was thinking about, you know, one, I've practiced as an artist, but not for long periods of time. And there's been like big gaps between, you know, practicing as an artist. And a lot of my work has been professionally in a curatorial facilitation project management role. So if they like, I want to hear from you know, from the audience, from you guys, like what experiences have you had in terms of responding to call outs or information that you think that I haven't included that's really important, to kind of as a sharing knowledge space or time?
I wanted to add, when you were talking about receiving news, whether or not you were accepted to an exhibition or not, just a really short, easy tip to check your spam folders. And I know I'm really bad at forgetting to do that, but the last thing you want is to submit to an exhibition that you really, really want to get in, and then get accepted but not see that email. You know, that's kind of heartbreaking. So make sure you're checking your spam folders.
Yeah, it's so easy for things to go into spam, even if you've been in contact with that person or, you know, that email address in the past, and just kind of something just feels wrong with Google or Outlook or Hotmail, and they just kind of like palm it off into spam, into the ether. And
I want to emphasize too, it never hurts to ask questions to the gallery you're submitting to. And Kerri said we're really open at the National Gallery. So if you ever are confused about anything on our submission form or just want to learn more, feel free to let us know. We're always happy to help. So I'm just copying my email again if you want to be added to that artist database.
Does anyone have anything that they want to share about their experiences, or, you know, if they've submitted to anything recently, or, you know, any good tips? Crickets, that's okay.
One more question. When is the next call at the gallery?
Mm-hmm.
So that just went out today, actually. And Dominique, I'm adding you to the artist database now, so I'll send that to you. But Kerri, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we're developing a new exhibition that will be on our sister island. So it's it's inviting artists that are from Little Cayman and Cayman Brac. So thinking about our sister islands artists, whether they are in the diaspora, so living in Grand Cayman, or kind of in London or in the US. So we're looking specifically at artists that are from Little Cayman and Cayman Brac. And it's just kind of a celebration of beauty. So thinking about, you know, how our landscape is changing, and, you know, like very much stepping into the appreciation and celebration of our landscape, of our, you know, landscape around us. There is another call out that's coming. So do keep your eye out for that. So the end of the week, there'll be a call out that Paige will send around for the big art auction. So do keep an eye out. That the details for that should be coming around on Friday. So that's an opportunity for you to sell your work. There will be an exhibition component to it, but there is it's an auction that we have quite frequently at the gallery. So in terms of exhibition callouts, those are kind of the two that are coming up, and there will be more opportunities. So at the moment we are kind of stepping into having more exhibitions in Little Cayman and Cayman Brac rotated quite frequently. So there are opportunities for that. There are opportunities for our virtual spaces. So you'll see some call outs for that soon as well. So we're working on developing a schedule for our digital exhibitions. And then our main exhibition space, keep an eye out for that. There are exciting things in the pipeline. Okay. Kay, did you have a question? Or
I think running through this, one of the things that I really hope that you would speak about maybe a little bit more was the artist statement. It's something that I find really difficult to express in words what my work is about and the way I feel about it. And I'm always kind of blown away when I come to the gallery and I read other people's, you know, and I think I wish that I could do that. So is there any way that, you know, as Paige said, that, you know, you could maybe help out on that, maybe on a one-to-one basis?
Yeah, so one of the things that, so when you read the statements or the labels on the wall, those are kind of taken from, you know, like the artist statements that are submitted, but then they're edited by the curatorial team. So that we're trying to make sure there's kind of a collective voice or consistent voice in those. So, I mean, we're not expecting you as an artist to, you know, to submit a statement that is as kind of like polished as those are, because they're very much team effort. They're written by kind of art historians that have, you know, history, like, you know, so there's all of this stuff that goes into writing those specific labels. But in terms of writing an artist statement, yeah, it's one of the things that is so hard as an artist. And when I've had to write them in the past and kind of even kind of thinking about it, so there's a project that I have in the back of my mind and thinking about, you know, how do I talk about that idea or this project or the concept that I have. And a lot of times I would advise writing it out, giving it to another artist to read, and, you know, seeing if they can understand what it is that you're writing and visualize what you, without showing them the work, just give them the statement to read, and then show them the work and ask them, you know, how would you advise that that I adjust this, or that, you know, the wording fits exactly what it is that you see. But a lot of when I've had to write artist statements, and even writing artist statements about pieces that are in our national collection, that it's referring, a lot of times I refer back to other statements that I've seen, to think about consistency of language, to think about, you know, how do you speak about this particular topic, or how do you talk about this particular media? And I've actually got my laptop on a book, so bear with me 1 second, I've just got to move my laptop. But there's a book which is in the gallery called The A to Z of Caribbean Art. There we go. Graceful, not graceful. So this book has within it, let's see if I can find without anything falling out of this. So within each section, there is information about the artist, so a bio, and then a statement. And what I've found in the past is having books where artists or other historians or other curators or arts professionals have written very extensively about work as a point of reference to then think about, okay, well, how do I talk about my work? And you know, it's that comparison. And that's kind of how I do kind of a lot of my writing, is thinking about, okay, well, how do I make this fit within a very specific context? What has been written before? And it's not copying, but, you know, just kind of understanding how to utilize the language. And this book is brilliant. I'd recommend it. This is not a sales pitch, by the way. No. But I would, so we have a few copies of these in the gallery. And they're a good way to know about, you know, what artists are doing kind of within the region, but it's a good way to think about how to present yourself. So, you know, if your work was presented in a catalog format or in a book format, what what would be written or what should be written about you as an artist, but then also as in terms of the artwork. The other thing is through kind of that, you know, like I was saying, that peer-to-peer review. So asking other artists, how would you write this? Or, you know, what have you written? And a lot of it is practice. It's writing it again and again, writing it for different pieces, thinking about it in different contexts, because also, you know, writing a statement for a project that is online is very different than writing it for an exhibition that is going to be for 4 months, or that's at the National Gallery, or that is in a smaller space. So, you know, there's different contexts of how you'd write the artist statement. But I think the first thing is that blind writing, to just get it out. Just write what you feel, write what you see, write what you try to do, and then go back and revisit it. Just like how you'd revisit a painting or a sculpture, or, you know, it's very much not something that's, you know, one shot done, boom, it's great. And it can be difficult. So I'd recommend drawing on another artist or other individuals. I find that asking my parents that are creative in very different ways, and, you know, they're not artists in terms of like fine artists. My father works with metal, my mother used to be a fashion designer. So asking them to read something that's creative and getting their opinion that's very different, and kind of mediating that as well, I find that to be quite useful. But then a lot of times you're like, oh, this is weird, I don't know what you're talking about, skin, and it's just strange.
Oh, thank you. That was really valuable.
I'm glad.
So we have a few questions coming through in the chat. The first one is, does the gallery work with local artists in getting their work overseas? So if you're overseas, say if you're in the States and you're submitting to a national gallery exhibition, we occasionally have certain grants specifically for that. But otherwise, if you're submitting to a separate show, we don't currently have a grant for that. But definitely keep your eye out for those specific, it'll be like a grant is the wording you're looking for there. Do you have anything to add, Kerri?
Yeah, so I think also in thinking about it from the other point, that if you are practicing in Cayman and you're thinking about exhibiting your work overseas, that quite a few years ago, we used to sponsor an artist away program, but the funding kind of fell through because times were very different in the 2000s versus the 2020, 2021. But there are quite a few different artist residencies that are happening within the Caribbean or within the US that are focused on Caribbean artists. So there are actually a lot of opportunities if you wanted to do a residency. I know that there's a few residencies at the moment that are within the Caribbean that they encourage, or I think the program first starts as a virtual residency and then transitions into a physical. So that's something thinking about traveling as well in this moment, you know, to be able to go into a residency, that's tricky. But I think in terms of opportunities, so one of the things that we are trying to do at the gallery is make sure that they're kind of collating what's happening within the region. A lot of that has kind of slowed down because of the pandemic. So there are a few less things that are happening. But in terms of thinking of, a few months ago or last year sometime, I saw an exhibition call out in the Bahamas and I was really excited. I was like, oh, there's something we can promote in Cayman. But actually they had changed the call out and it was just specifically for Bahamian artists. So we're trying to keep an eye out for kind of other opportunities, but I definitely say sometimes Google is your best friend. But yeah, we're trying to make sure that we promote different opportunities.
This question might have been answered already. Are there any open calls in 2021? And Kerri kind of explained. The next one is the Sister Islands exhibition that is open to residents of Little Cayman or Cayman Brac. And then later in the year, we have the Big Art Auction 7, which is just an open call, or is it invitation?
So I think it's a mixture of both.
Okay.
But there's a very limited amount of space
Right.
for, so it's most artists will have one piece in the auction, and it's kind of a very, very limited number of artists that can
Right.
can exhibit.
The next question is talking about naming your work. So they want to know, what process do we go through to find the names of our works? They say they struggle with naming theirs. So it's a great question.
That's a tricky one, because I think that, you know, there are various ways if you want to go through it in terms of like a mechanical process. So you have some artists that will work in a very specific series for, you know, a number of years, and it's literally green 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, it'll kind of go through that process. You know, you've had artists that have done that in the years throughout art history. I think that it's kind of like naming your child, or like, you know, naming a pet, that you have to kind of, I mean, I don't have children, and currently don't have pets. I only have plants, and I name my plants. But, you know, it's something that you have to almost feel, in a sense that, you know, it's what the artwork speaks to, what it, how it speaks to you, or how you want to speak to the audience. But, in terms of naming, yeah, I think that it's something that, you know, as airy-fairy as it sounds, but it, you know, leave it for a bit, it'll come to you, or just name it Untitled. That's all right as well. I mean, no one has really hacked anyone down for having an untitled work. Call it Blue Untitled, or, you know. Do we have any other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
As an emerging artist trying to build a body of work, do you have to rely on an open call to get your work out there, or can I just walk up to a gallery and say, here, I made this thing, do you like it? Would you like it in your gallery? How would I go about getting my work out into a gallery?
So it depends on the type of gallery. It depends on what your intentions are with the work. So for instance, if you want to sell your work, you can approach a commercial gallery. That's, I mean, a lot of times that's how they get to know new artists. And a lot of galleries are open to, you know, kind of understanding what's happening in the art scene locally. So like, for instance, like Kennedy Gallery, I'm not 100% sure of the process, but I'm pretty sure that you can go in and, you know, speak with them about representation of your work. In terms of exhibiting, you know, a lot of exhibitions are developed from curators, know artists. So a lot of it is, you know, it's kind of that chicken and egg, you know, like, well, how do I get myself known until I get, you know, it's like, you know, you apply for a job and they say you have no experience, but then where do you get the experience? You know, it's kind of this back and forth. But I think things like, you know, thinking about spaces like Parcel 110 and, you know, proposing an exhibition in that space, or thinking about, you know, putting an exhibition together yourself with other artists and kind of getting the word out, so that specifically for the gallery, we don't really take exhibition proposals in that sense. We do have a community gallery that is reserved for kind of more, I guess more, what's the word, established artists. So they're very short exhibitions that last about 3 weeks, but the space is usually reserved for our bigger exhibition schedule that's planned like 2.5 years in advance. But on that note, it's really important for curators to know you. So making sure that your presence, whether that's a social media presence, making sure that's really active, or coming along to different events, and maybe even like being cheeky and saying to a curator, like, hey, this is my work, can I show you what I've done? Or do you know of any exhibitions that, you know, this work could fit in? And sometimes it is that, you know, kind of that word of mouth, or it, you know, I've had experiences in the past working with a gallery where an individual has come in, printed out their portfolio and said, if there's anything that's coming up, consider my work. And there's been an opportunity where we were kind of putting together an exhibition. We're like, oh, well, actually this person, you know, and kind of referring back to it. So it's kind of a little bit of finding a way to get yourself known. and I'd encourage you to think about any kind of spaces or pop-up things that are happening. Cayman Art Week, when it comes around in 2022, is a brilliant way of, I mean, it's specifically for collectors, but everyone in the community more or less goes along to it to a certain degree. So it's a good space to get your work known as well.
Thank you.
So a few things pop up, but for some reason I can't. Is there anything else, Paige? Any other questions?
Wonderful conversations here, sharing artworks.
Oh, Jenny, do you have a question or a comment?
No, a question actually. I'm thinking about what Kay asked about, you know, a statement, and I'm thinking about my bio or CV for those who are emerging artists or returning artists like me. I call myself returning because I did, and I was away many years and then come back. Would the gallery team would be open to review some of the website and help us maybe to give it a better, take a look if there is nothing that you don't think, fine, but you know, like to offer some kind of guidance maybe in that, you know, sense.
Yeah, so one of the things that that the Business of Art series is meant to activate is kind of building yourself as an artist. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do through this series, is provide a platform that you can speak about, you know, your artist statement or kind of talk about your website. In terms of other opportunities, I'm not entirely sure at the moment. And this is where I'm going to play the card of, I've just started working not so long ago again. So I've had a little bit of a hiatus at the gallery, and I'm coming back on the team. So I know there's a lot of educational programs that we want to develop in that sense of working with artists to help to develop your practice or how we present ourselves. So that's something that I would say definitely keep an eye out for, that we're trying to create more opportunities like that, or connect people with other individuals that would be able to assist with that.
So it's possible that we're gonna have another series like this talking about that part. That's what you're saying? Talking about CV, websites, and that. Okay.
So I think Paige, this is a good moment to tell us about what else is happening with the Business of Art.
Yeah, no, of course. So that you kind of hit the nail on the head there. That's exactly what we were thinking with when starting back this this program, Business of Art, is to give our artists some resources that they can apply to their professional career. Including, you know, websites, portfolios. We saw open calls today. We actually, the next one I want to mention is on writing funding proposals. So we had a few questions about getting that funding, perhaps for shipping overseas to another exhibition. And that is going to be hosted by Miss Rosie Gordon-Wallace. And it's also on Zoom. All of our Business of Art sessions are currently on Zoom. So that will take place on the 24th of August at 7 p.m. And it is an RSVP only, so same deal as tonight. You'll RSVP and get a link to that session.
And I just want to say that Rosie Wallace Gordon is fantastic. So she is originally from Jamaica, but she's been living in Miami for probably the last 25, 30 years as a curator. And she works with some really interesting emerging artists, established artists. So her platform is called something like Inkbar. 1 second, I'll soon tell you. Let me just quickly open my Facebook. Why don't I remember what it's called? Diaspora Vibe. So Diaspora Vibe Cultural Arts Incubator. So she works kind of across dance. So thinking about performance art, dance, activating sculptures, activating painters, so kind of across the whole shebang. And she's really personable. She's really brilliant. I would definitely recommend coming along to that session.
We had an interesting comment in the chat talking about kind of researching the gallery you're going to submit to before submitting, and kind of thinking about how that reflects on you as an artist. So thinking, you know, some may reflect you in a nice light, but others in maybe not the direction you want to go in. They say they feel it's really important to look around a gallery and see how they look after the artwork, as well as display and curate the work. They feel it's important to look at how you want to be represented, which I think is a great point.
Absolutely. And working in different spaces. So there was a couple of years ago, I was working with a few artists that we put together an exhibition in Oxford, and then that exhibition traveled down to London. And the difference between the space in Oxford and the space in London was very different. And there was two artworks that didn't transition well into the new space. So the space that we were in London was very much kind of like a warehouse with like really rough flooring, really rough walls. And it was a really edgy space, but for their work that was quite delicate and needed a more refined space to kind of enjoy it, or like a more intimate space. This was just too big of an industrial space that we tried as a curatorial team to mediate that, but it, you know, and it did kind of end up being lost, and the transition wasn't. So I definitely think about the specific project that you're proposing for an exhibition, and that's one of the reasons why I said the location. So definitely thinking about where is it going to be exhibited. If it's an immersive project that you want people to be completely immersed in, you know, will that transition well into a virtual space, or will some of that immersion, some of the immersion elements be lost? So kind of thinking about different spaces and how the work will translate into those spaces. Or even, you know, a lot of curators will have, you know, different curators will have different curatorial styles as well. So, you know, if you're working with a specific curator and you know that they have a very unique style, then kind of thinking, well, you know, does that complement the work that I that I produce? So those are some of the things that, you know, you can get really excited to be like, oh, but it's an open call and I need to get my artwork out there. But, you know, will it actually be detrimental to you as an artist, or detrimental to how people engage with the work that you have planned, that, you know, it doesn't fit within that specific theme, or, you know, this particular opportunity? And I know that, like, in that sense that we say that, and, you know, there aren't that many, that it's not like there's a plethora of opportunities happening in Cayman that you can pick, choose, refuse, like 5 in a week. But it's really important if you're also thinking internationally, you know, how does that fit in?
Another question, I think this is about the selection process. So after you submit, how does the gallery select the works to be included in the exhibition? Is that correct? Am I on the right page?
Share my screen.
So I think, Kerri, you mentioned this a little bit in your presentation, but we do have a national selection committee, which usually, depending on the project, it could include professionals from overseas, as well as professionals across our islands. And so your submission is considered, the quality of your submission is considered. So if you didn't, as Kerri said, fill out every part of the application form, that does go into consideration. So that is presented to this jury, to this committee, and they usually go through, it's like a checklist essentially to ensure that all of these points are being met: quality, diversity in the exhibition. So there's certain criteria that needs to be met. Do you want to speak a little bit more about that, Kerri, as well?
Yeah, so with when we have exhibitions that are juried, so go through a juried process, we try to make sure that there's like a rubric, that the work isn't influenced in any kind of, it's not influenced in any kind of personal biases. And what we've tried to do a few times is to get as Paige was saying, to get international professionals that are working within the region, but also, within the diaspora. So making sure that they have some connection back to the art scene in Cayman, because it can be a sense, like I've heard an individual once kind of refer to something in an artwork, and as professionals, you have to kind of say, well, okay, well, in this context, that it is read differently because of our local context, and when you have situations where you're then having to justify your local context, then you kind of know that maybe, I'm not saying this has happened with the gallery, but that's when you know that maybe this individual is not the best fit. But at the gallery, we try to make sure that all of our jurors have connections back with either the art scene or with the islands in particular. But there's kind of like several rounds or several processes that the artwork will go through. So there's kind of the initial kind of looking through to make sure they fit, and that will kind of happen with the curatorial team, that will look through to make sure that the forms are completed, that all the images are there, that the statements are there, and then that's compiled into kind of a chunk, not palatable, but an easy digestible format for the jurors to then do several processes of, I guess, elimination and selection. How does the gallery sift? Oh, is that the question that we were just?
Yeah, that's the question that we just answered. I think that's what they were going for.
Yeah, so we do the call outs and then kind of go through different rounds and processes. Anything else? No, we've run over by a few minutes. Don't know if anyone's like dying to have dinner. Sorry.
Okay, well, if there's no more questions, we'll wrap up tonight. Thank you also again so much for coming. I want to remind you, our next Business of Art session will take place. That's the 24th of August at 7 p.m. with Miss Rosie Gordon-Wallace. And that's via Zoom. So do RSVP to that. We look forward to seeing you all there.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for coming.